We arrived in La Paz just in time to see La Festividad del Señor del Gran Poder, which is an 8-kilometer long dancing parade in which the participants perform traditional dances decked out in incredible costumes and accompanied by live bands, who are also dancing in addition to playing their instruments. Some of the costumes can weigh as much as 40 pounds, and by the end of the parade, many of the dancers can barely even walk. After the weekend's festivities, we took the motorcycle to a local mechanic in an attempt to fix the leaky oil seal in the water pump. The mechanic assured me that we could easily find the new parts we needed in La Paz, as he was destroying the old ones with a screwdriver. I then proceeded to spend the day visiting every motorcycle and auto parts store in La Paz, to no avail. And since our local mechanic had no space to store the bike overnight, we ended up pushing the bike uphill 1 mile back to our friend Danny's house. The next day, we loaded the bike into a truck and sent it off to a better mechanic, and we set off to search for the parts we needed. La Paz is an incredibly dense city, so you might think it would be nice and walkable, but unfortunately its density is a product of the fact that it's jammed into a canyon, so most of the roads are incredibly windy and steep, and many of them spontaneously turn into stairs at places. Because of the difficult terrain, the cable car, or teleférico, is actually a viable means of transportation. And here in La Paz, they serve the function that subways do in many other cities. What's more, they're quiet, smooth, and provide incredible views of the city. The only drawback is the lingering uneasiness brought about by the fact that if anything fails, you'll meet your end falling through the roof of somebody's house. Just outside of the city, we visited the Valley of the Moon, which is a valley of silt deposits that have been eroded into incredible formations by the downcutting of a nearby river. And of course, we found time for one of my favorite things, the local markets. Here in La Paz, the markets contain an astounding variety of potatoes, more shapes and sizes and colors than I've ever seen anywhere else. And we also found a giant version of the achopchas we saw in Ecuador. The very instant my stomach was better, we went straight back to the street food, starting with delicious roasted pork sandwiches bought from a tent on the side of the road. So we've had kind of a rough time here in Bolivia so far. First I got sick, then the motorcycle. And then while we were looking for parts for the motorcycle, I managed to lose my wallet. But it's not all bad. The healthcare here is great. I got my yellow fever vaccine, went to the doctor and got antibiotics for my stomach problems, all for under $100. So I guess I can't complain.
I hope I can get back your money.
Oh yeah, an ATM stole some of Gabby's money too. So we'll see. Anyway, yeah, it's been a little rough, but things are looking up. Since we were still waiting for the motorcycle part, we decided to visit some of the more touristy attractions of La Paz. We spent some time wandering the streets of El Mercado de las Brujas, or the Witches' Market, where you can buy all of the coca leaves and mummified llama fetuses that you could possibly need. And we took a day to visit the nearby ruins of Tiwanaku, which house the iconic Puerta del Sol. Unfortunately, while we were there, the lighting was horrible. But here's a great shot of what the back side of the iconic Puerta del Sol looks like. Tiwanaku is another archaeological oddity that gets ancient aliens enthusiasts all in a tizzy, mostly because many of the monuments here are carved from an extremely hard stone with great precision, and even today we're still not exactly sure how these things were manufactured. However, as a more likely alternative to extraterrestrial intervention, I would suggest that these things are a product of the incredible problem-solving abilities and persistence of human beings, who have been known to accomplish some pretty spectacular things even with very limited resources. And here's a llama, because llamas are great. And also living amongst the ruins we saw wild guinea pigs, which look every bit as delicious as their domestic relatives. Back in La Paz, we finally got our hands on the motorcycle parts we needed, so we went to work cleaning and repairing everything we could, taking advantage of our time in the shop. And then once the motorcycle was all fixed up, we packed our things and said our goodbyes to our friend Danny and prepared to head south. We left La Paz on Saturday morning, so fortunately the traffic wasn't quite as horrendous as it usually is on the weekdays. And within an hour or two we found ourselves on the open Altiplano, where the roads are straight and the wind is extremely cold and strong. In fact, our drive from La Paz to Potosi was easily the coldest of the trip. But fortunately our campsite for that night had a nice surprise in store for us. So it was dark when we got here last night, but check out what we found. We have our own private hot spring. but I think it's way too cold to go swimming. And we made friends with some of the local residents of the hot spring, who clearly knew that humans like to eat delicious things for breakfast and demanded that we share. So in Bolivia, gasoline costs 2 to 3 times as much for foreigners, but we found a way to get around this. We're parked out of sight of the gas station. We're sending Gabby with the gas can to walk over to the gas station and fill up the gas can, since she can pass as Bolivian and I can't. We can only get about a gallon at a time, but it's still better than paying 3 times the normal price. Many a Spaniard came to the New World in search of El Dorado, the fabled lost city of gold. And while they never found it, they did find a literal mountain of silver right over there. That's Cerro Rico. At the base of it is the city of Potosi. Most of the high-quality ore has been mined out by now, but there's still active mining going on even today. Once our tank was full of slightly less than legal gasoline, we made fast tracks across the Altiplano for the town of Uyuni. We arrived in Uyuni a bit too late to visit the main attraction of the area, so we went to the train graveyard instead, where we found an impressive collection of half-scrapped steam engines, many bearing signs of explosive catastrophic failure of important-looking parts. And then, since it was getting late and the forecast was for somewhere around -15 Celsius, we headed off into town to look for the cheapest hotel we could find with motorcycle parking. And the one we found was perhaps unsurprisingly full of other motorcyclists. The next morning, after a brief stop at a hardware store for replacement parts, we headed out for the Salar de Uyuni with our new friends Chris and Mark, who had just ridden in from Chile across the Atacama Desert. The Salar de Uyuni is the world's largest salt flat. It's extremely large. It's around 100 times larger than the famous Bonneville Salt Flats of North America. And it's also extremely flat, one of the flattest places on the Earth, varying less than a meter in elevation across its entire surface. And apart from a few monuments and hotels constructed from blocks of salt, there's really nothing out there. So as you might imagine, it's pretty fun to drive across this thing at high speeds. As long as you can avoid your fellow motorcycle riders, you can drive pretty much anywhere you want at any speed you want. In the middle of the salt flat you can find a few islands, the remains of ancient volcanoes that poke up through the salt. From the edge of the salt flat, these islands can't even be seen, but amazingly enough, there's still life out here. The main inhabitants of the islands are small shrubs and Echinopsis atacamensis, a large columnar cactus. After a very pleasant but blindingly bright picnic lunch on the island, we headed out onto the salt again to spend some time taking in our surreal environment and also taking lots of ridiculous forced perspective pictures. As the day drew to a close, we said goodbye to Chris and Mark, as they were planning to head north across the Salar to the nearest town. A bold move, considering that they didn't have a GPS and the forecast was for temperatures well below freezing. I really hope they made it. That's all for now. Thanks everyone for all your support and encouragement, and an especially large thank you to my father, Rich Franz, and my motorcycle guru, John Comey, for all of their help with the great water pump seal scavenger hunt of La Paz. We'll see you all next time.